on several stories until they got tired of seeing me show up in all these places they didn't want me. And then they called me directly and they said, "What do you want from me?" And at that point, I told them I wanted to be in the helicopters. And I wanted to see, as things were getting busier and busier, how they were spending resources on the ground. So at that point, the summer of 2014, we saw a huge spike in Central American migrants, women and children mostly, that were showing up and presenting themselves asking for asylum. This was unprecedented what was happening. And so Obama responded, calling it a humanitarian crisis, pledged billions of dollars. But I wanted to show what that actually meant. What that actually means is more resources on the state, local, federal level, and also overtime and all this new technology. And in the past, there might be one helicopter up at any given time, which would aid the Border Patrol in their pursuits. And at this point, there were about 3 in the air at any given time, where they brought in all of these old Army Reserve pilots, and they were just spending a lot of money. We've never seen this before to try to secure a border, but I need to remind you, this border has never been secured. So it's only because traffic is shifting that they're spending all this money there. So this is, you can see Texas on the right and Mexico on the left. This is Hidalgo and Reynosa. The National Guard was there for several months. From the air, the helicopters have a unique perspective where they can actually see the footprints and track them. So they can drop GPS points and then call agents on the ground to respond. It's a really interesting mix of super high-tech and low-tech approaches because they have all of this military surplus materials and resources, but then you still have to go and manually track these footprints, which is extremely time-consuming and extremely hot. Here we'll see footprints on the Mexican side of the Rio Grande. These are agents pursuing individuals who have fled a vehicle bailout. So when the car is being chased by police, it's not that uncommon that the car will stop suddenly and everybody will scatter into the woods. This is extremely dangerous because people get disoriented and lost, and it's really hot down here. And this is how people act. So, although in some ways, by spending more money to help these migrants, we actually make the journey much more difficult and much more expensive, and then much more reliant on smugglers, which gives the smugglers more power. Here we see a man who's returning to Mexico. The helicopters making sure that he makes it all the way back across. The Border Patrol cannot follow and cannot pursue anyone across the Rio Grande because they do not have the right to enter Mexico. And everybody knows this. They'll return to Mexico and then try again a few hours later. It's exactly what we're seeing here as well. We need to turn backs. So they'll drop the GPS point and they'll monitor the area to try to see if they can apprehend them on the next try. Also, moments like this are pretty heartbreaking to watch because it's so obvious from above that they do feel like this is their last chance of trying to hide. This is the agent that was pursuing them in the sand dunes.
Hi, I'm Glenna Gordon. I'm happy to be here and see so many of you come out. I went to Columbia J School and I graduated 10 years ago in 2006, so it feels pretty neat to be back here talking about my work now. I did not plan to be a photographer. I always thought I was going to be a writer. And basically after I finished J School, I didn't really know what I was going to do with myself. And I actually did a lot of courses after criticism and writing about the arts, and that was sort of the path that I've seen for myself. And after I graduated, my brother was working in Africa, and I went to visit him, and I was like, this is great. I'm going to move here for 6 months. And 10 years later, I've spent the better part of the last decade there. So I started in Uganda, where I was working mainly as a writer, and I also took some pictures. And as my career progressed, people would be like, nice story, that was a great picture. And eventually I figured out I was a better photographer than I ever was a writer. And ultimately, there were only so many hours in a day, and I wanted to be really good at one thing. So it felt important at some point to make a choice. And so after I'd been living in Uganda for a couple of years, I felt like I had a ceiling and I wanted more opportunities. And so I moved to Liberia in 2009. And that was where things really started to come together for me. It was at a moment that budgets and media were really being slashed, and there was no other photographers around. So I got every job that they weren't going to fly somebody in for. And it was a really great opportunity. It was a really hard place to live, but eventually something changed, and I started to love it. And then in 2011, I was back in Nigeria covering elections, and I also had some work on show in Nigeria at the Lagos Photo Festival. And I was invited there by the African Artists Foundation, and they later invited me back to Nigeria to do a residency. And that is where I began this project, Nigeria Ever After. I had thought I was going to go to Nigeria and do like a big serious project on infrastructure and then like a small side project on weddings, and I never really got around to the infrastructure project. So it was kind of amazing. My idea was just to sort of like go to a bunch of weddings. I didn't really have much more of a plan than that. And at first I didn't really know how to find weddings, but I just sort of asked everybody I met. I was like, hey, do you know anybody who's having a wedding? And everybody would be like, oh, yeah, there's one last weekend. But the more people I asked, the more weddings I would find, and eventually I got better at finding them. One of the main ways I found them was actually through other Nigerian wedding photographers. The groom in this picture is a wedding photographer who I met at another wedding, and I was like, hey, do you have any weddings next weekend? And he was like, yeah, I'm getting married. And so I went to his wedding. I went to a lot of incredibly opulent weddings. And actually, the guy in the last picture told me about this wedding, and then it was just sort of a matter of talking my way through about 15 layers of security, which was not better. And it really was a great opportunity to say something about the Nigerian economy. Nigeria is one of the biggest economies in Africa after South Africa, and it's hard to visualize that. It's hard to understand just how much money there is there. And by going to some of these really opulent weddings, it was sort of a way for me to show that. But it's also a really poor country, and there's a lot in between. And I never expected weddings to be such an opportunity to talk about so many different issues, but I was glad to find that they were. My favorite pictures from this series are ones where the narrative isn't quite clear. In this picture, what happens at a lot of the weddings is they do something called spraying, where they throw money at the bride and the groom, and kind of like at a club when they marry. And it's the bridesmaids' jobs to go around and pick up the money and collect it for the bride and groom. And this is a particularly fancy wedding. You can actually tell that's actually some American. I think that's a 20 or something that they're just throwing in the air. It's also an opportunity to look at the way Nigeria is divided by religion. This is from a wedding in central Nigeria, which is sort of, it's called the Middle Belt, and it's sort of the last part of the Christian stronghold in the south, and it's where the Muslim bit of the north begins. Chasing weddings eventually led me to northern Nigeria, and this is a wedding in northern Nigeria. I heard about a mass wedding being organized by the Kano state government, and I was like, yeah, I gotta get to that. And I didn't really know very much about northern Nigeria or how to be around there or what it was like to work there until I went. And very few people are as fearful of northern Nigeria as people in southern Nigeria. So I didn't know what to expect, and then I got there and I was like, this is wonderful. Everybody was so welcoming and so kind and so excited to see me at their wedding, and I was never turned away, and I never felt uncomfortable or unwelcomed. It's sort of amazing when you show up at somebody's best day, when everybody like looks their best. People really want to be photographed, and that was great. Like, access was not a struggle. It was, once I learned how to operate and how to find weddings, as soon as I could get there, I would greet the bride and the groom and greet their families, and we'd get their blessings to me taking pictures, and I was always welcomed. One thing led to another, and as I was beginning to work more and more in northern Nigeria, I learned about there's a large culture of women who write romance novels in Hausa, the local language there. It's the second most commonly spoken language in Africa after Swahili. It's spoken in the entire Sahel, which is the strip of land below the Sahara Desert. And the books are about love and marriage. So it was a really natural transition to move from the weddings to the novelists. And that is what the book that I made, Diagram of the Heart, is about. I remember after I made my first couple trips to college, being so excited that there were these amazing women there writing novels. It just sort of blew my mind. And, you know, I had been so afraid of northern Nigeria before I went there, and all that people hear about is Boko Haram. And yeah, that's something that is a very real issue, but it's also not everything that's happening. And it was a pretty wonderful opportunity for me to do something entirely different. And so this is a woman named Farida Ado. She is a novelist. And the thing that's funny about it is it's still a very conservative culture. So her husband would never want her to leave the house and have an office job. It's totally okay with her writing novels at home. And then some of the novels were pretty subversive. There's a lot of women who are writing and speaking out against child marriage, against human trafficking. And one of the most prominent novelists was actually a child bride herself, who was left as a divorce. She was married off at 13. She was left as a divorcee at 17, managed to get educated and become a novelist. And now she's this just powerhouse who advocates for women and girls all across northern Nigeria. The main thing that I wanted to do was to sort of find a way to translate this otherworldly place to an audience here. It was really hard because nobody thinks about things besides Boko Haram and poverty and a lot of the narratives that are so dominant in Africa. And you know, and the narrative has changed a little bit in the 10 years that I worked in Africa. When I was first working there, it was very much like slums, poverty, refugees, and then this other narrative started competing with that, which is the Africa Rising narrative, which is mobile phones and baking and internet. And to me, neither of them remained true to what I was seeing and what I was experiencing. So my goal was always to sort of work outside of the confines of those narratives and find something else to take pictures of. So those projects were both personal projects. I was pretty lucky that along the way I was able to sell them as packages and also to get more assignments to keep doing them. You know, one of the things I did, for example, with the weddings, I went on assignment for Business Week to a wedding expo, which is like a Las Vegas style wedding convention in Abuja, and was able to go on assignment that way and publish some of the outtakes. The novelist stuff, when I first tried to sell it, nobody was interested, and I applied for a million grants and I didn't get anything. And then when I was like just about ready to give up, I had the opportunity to show the work at Open Society and have support for the project that way, and it led to shows at Movie Walls, where the work is still up and you can see it, I think, through the end of this month. And it was also at Photoville. And going back to Nigeria again and again also gave me the opportunity to do other stories. And in almost exactly 1 year ago, an editor at the New York Times Magazine reached out to me and asked me if I had any ideas for a journey. And I always wanted to take this train across Nigeria. And I'd actually tried to take it before multiple times and failed. There was one time I literally went to a train station in Lagos, took all of my stuff packed, ready to take the train. And then the French invaded Mali, and I got an assignment in Mali. I turned around from the train station to go and get ready to go to Mali instead. So I was stoked when I finally got to take this train. And so, I know one of the things that people are interested in is how assignments and personal work sort of come together. And for me, it's been very fluid, and that doing personal work has led to assignments and has led me to have more of an in-depth knowledge about a place to pitch stories and get better assignments too. So, so I tried to take the train another time and also failed. I didn't have a permission letter, and they told me I could sit in my seat and not take any pictures except for from my seat. And I'm like, wow. So this is actually a picture from the third time I'm trying to take the train. And this is the station in Lagos where everybody is boarding. The train is the slowest way across Nigeria. There's literally, aside from probably walking across Nigeria, it's faster to drive, it's faster to take a bus, it's faster to take a plane. So people are taking the train for lots of different reasons. This guy was an Air Scout, which is like a Boy Scout but for the Air Force. And we are still Facebook friends and posting every now. I met tons of people taking the train. The girl in the blue hijab on the right is actually one of the very first people I met at the train station. And people were really surprised to see it. Like, why are you taking this train? What are you doing here? And we're also pretty suspicious of me at first. But the very best thing I did was get this permission letter, because then everybody who worked on the train was on board with me being there, helped me out, watched my back, and essentially like allowed me to do this work. And it's supposed to take 2 days. It took us like 3.5 days. But it was also pretty phenomenal because the train went through parts of nature I had never seen and would never see for any other reason. The tracks were built during colonial times and refurbished in the past years by the Chinese. And so they are the most direct routes that are usually related to where there are mineral deposits or other things that need to be transported to the coast. And they are not related to the road system that I have been driving around as I worked in Nigeria over the years. The train was incredibly crowded. But the best thing was that the longer I stayed on the train, the more people trusted me. Like I remember this was I think on the second or third morning, and I was like walking through this car, and they're like, "You're still here?" And which is a good thing because I definitely got more and more tired, so I had less energy to put myself out there. But people were more and more welcoming to me. And so, one of the reasons people take the train is if they're transporting animals or they're transporting cargo. And there are people who I wouldn't necessarily get a chance to interact with on a regular basis. This is a Fulani herdsman, and a lot of Fulanis actually live totally off the grid. And so it was sort of amazing. I was just like walking down the train one afternoon, and there was just this shaft of light coming down on this man, and the woman in the front was very ill, and we were taking her to her village to get treatment from a traditional healer. And we had some sheep and some little girls with him, and we were just sitting on the bags. And I'd never get to encounter this group of people unless I was on the train, and so that was what made it really neat. And on my last night on the train, when I was walking up and down, I came across an old woman reading a house novel. And this was near when I was finishing Diagram of the Heart, so it was so neat for me to see this. I just remember being so surprised. And this actually ended up being the last photo in my book. So a lot of the projects were really able to feed into each other. And, and I got to spend a whole lot of time in Nigeria over the course of some of this work.
My name is Malin Fazamai, and I'm born and raised in Sweden. And I did a training for photography in high school, and completely fell in love with it because I was never that good in school because I was dyslexic, and photography was the first thing that I felt like I had good grades in without having to work 5 times as hard as everybody else. So I kind of fell in love with it, and my mom came by like buy me like a real camera, and I started out by shooting my friends. And when I was in high school, my mom told me about international cinematography in New York, and I always knew that I wanted to go to New York, and so I applied there when I was 18, but then when I was 19, which was probably a little bit too young of an age to go there at the time, but it seemed like a good idea. And I didn't know much about photography. I did the program, and it was probably a little bit too quick for me. And after that, I felt like I needed to get more experience, travel. So for about a year, I assisted different photographers here in New York, and I saved a bunch of money, and I was working at a lab, and decided I was going to go to Ethiopia for half a year. And after that, I got little grants here and there, and I lived in Southeast Asia, Brazil. And at some point, I realized that I wasn't independently wealthy and actually had to support myself. And I kind of had this awakening where I needed to basically get a little bit more serious about how to place my stories and also the stories I wanted to tell. And through my journeys, when I was traveling, I came across with a lot of refugee issues, so that kind of became my core issue. I worked in the South Pacific with people who've been displaced because of climate change, and also in Sri Lanka when people were displaced from the civil war that was going on there. And kind of my story that kind of established me was this story that I did in Israel about African refugees. So there's about 50,000 African refugees living in Israel today. They're primarily from Sudan and Eritrea. And I've always been interested in Israel, but it's also one of the most covered places in the world, and I didn't really know what I would add to that whole debate because there's very good journalists working there, and I thought this story was an interesting thoroughfare in the whole debate about Jewish identity and what Israel is as a state, and also what it's like being a refugee living in a country that, for the most part, was founded by refugees. So my first trip there, I went there on commission from Time, and I approached them with this project with an editor called named Phil Becker, and he was like, okay, and gave me a letter that I was working for them, which kind of helped me with access. And so this is a fence on the border with Israel and Egypt. And in 2007 until 2014, people started have been streaming in, but about when they constructed this fence, nobody's really been able to enter into Israel since then. And so the 50,000 refugees that's living in Israel today, about 2 years ago, the Israeli government opened a detention center in the Negev desert called Holot, and telling people that have been in Israel for more than 5 years that they have to report to this detention center. And when they first started this, the UN kind of went in and was like, you can't just put people in prison without a cause. And so what it's not officially a prison, it's an open detention center, but you have to check in about 3 times a day, and the nearest town is about an hour away by car. So you basically have these guys just wandering the desert, not really knowing what to do with themselves, and the only option that they're offered is either you let Israel deport you to your country or to a third country in Africa, which is usually Uganda or Rwanda. And so I spent a lot of time outside of this detention center. I was no journalists have really been allowed to enter it, but since these guys are allowed to walk outside, you can still access them. And in the beginning, it was a little bit weird because you have like about 2,000 men out in the desert and you're like a lone girl, but all these guys were so amazing and wonderful, and they would have barbecues outside and like feed me, and like were some of the nicest people I ever met. And at the same time, I also spent a lot of time in the community in South Tel Aviv, where most of the African migrants live, which is one of the more poor neighborhoods in Israel. And that has created a lot of frictions between the migrants and the Israelis that live there. Because basically when you enter into Israel, what they start doing, we have a process to process refugees. So they would just put them on a bus that went to South Tel Aviv. Some of them would sleep in the park in the beginning and then try to make their way and find a job and try to support themselves. This is a graduation party of a Sudanese refugee that graduated from one of the best schools in Israel. He took his bachelor's in economics. And it was this really lovely event where it was almost like a movie. This guy is basically giving this speech to everybody who showed up for his party and said something like, if I can do this, you can do this as well, and you really have to believe in yourself. And the next second, the room was just stormed by immigration police checking everybody's papers. And that night, they arrested about 7 people. And this is outside of Holod Detention Center with some Israelis that showed up to show solidarity with the refugees. This is Samrawit, which is one of my heroes there. She's fluent in Hebrew and was one of the strongest women I've probably met in my life. She would go with the refugees to hospitals and advocate for them, because sometimes when they go to the hospital turn them away because they think they have diseases that they will take with other patients and put them in other rooms or try to refuse them services. Surveillance in Tel Aviv in general is high. It's higher than in New York. So most of the refugees live in little rooms like this where they work out a 12-hour shift to basically, like a lot of the refugees that come here, they've already put themselves in very high debt because a lot of them have been captured before they entered into Israel. So a lot of them have had to pay ransoms to up to $20,000. So a lot of them are working off the debt that they accumulated by getting them. This is baby Coco. That was a little girl that got stabbed in the head by an Israeli man that afterwards in the trial said that he stabbed her because she was a black terrorist and he wanted to kill black babies. But he was obviously a crazy man, but it was at a time where there's Israeli politicians would have very loaded language about the refugees, calling them cancer, calling them terrorists and infiltrators. And so in the beginning, things weren't that bad, but in the last few years, the rhetoric against them has gotten much worse. And this is a landscape view of Holod Detention Center. And so this is a magazine story I did to New York Times Magazine about surfing in Senegal. I've never been to Senegal before, and I was basically going to Senegal to take part in the Dakar Arts Exhibition Festival, and I was showing work there. And I've had friends before who's been to Senegal and lived there, and they tell me things about surfing. And I had also seen the surfing film called Endless Summer. And so the first stop in that film is Dakar, Senegal. And I thought, like when I saw the film, like mind you, it's made in the 70s, but it's about these 2 guys from California that travel around the world to find endless summer and the perfect wave. And so when they go to Dakar, like you see all the Africans like watching these 2 white guys like surfing, and they're very much in the background, and they kind of almost look like pop. So I just felt like I wanted to go there to do a story about surfing in a Senegalese perspective and what surfing looks like there today and kind of what it means to the youth there. This is a picture of Secret Spot, which is kind of this surf club, I would say, where people go and like rent boards, drink tea, eat food, and like look at other people surfing. And in the last few years, I would say about 10 years, surfing has become bigger and bigger in Senegal. It used to be that it was something that only expats did because getting a surfboard can run you a few $100s and most Senegalese people can't really afford that. But since these surf spots started opening up, gear has become more accessible, like wetsuits and surfboards. It's become more accessible to some of the Senegalese people. And also it's become like the younger people have gotten into it, they're also, it's become a source of income for them because they can become surf instructors for the expats, and also some of the, like this is Mangala, he's a really good surfer, and he would tell me about that he would Google different surfers in the US and try to imitate their moves. And he also worked as a surf instructor. This is at a surfing cafe in Almaty. This is off of Angor Island, where there's one surf club and people take the boats over to this island to go and surf the break that was in the summer. This is Nagala walking to the beach with a surfboard, and I think this picture is kind of funny in the way that, yeah, you have the car, you have you have the horse, and the surfer, and it's Senegal today. This is Fadu, who is one of the best surfers in Senegal. And he started surfing when he was 7 years old, and was this young Francois who taught him how to surf. And he had a little surf club for some of the younger kids in the village. And so Fadu was really good at surfing, so Francois took him under his wing, and he's become a surf instructor today, and he was able to use the Senegal for the first time and travel abroad to participate in surfing competitions. This is in his village in Angor. And this is him with his students. These are students from the American school. And this is a different secret spot. And so, yeah, the struggle is always like, magazines don't really have funds really to send people places. So whenever I'm going somewhere, I always, different editors to tell them where I'm going and what I'm going to be working on. And I think when I was in Senegal this time, I did a story for Vogue about Fashion Week, and I did this story, and I also did a story for Vogue about how people just go to the mosque, and I just, wherever I go, I just always try to make it as productive of a trip as I can.
Hi, Renee. My name is Mariana City. Like Ben, I wanted to be a writer. I always thought that telling stories were fascinating. Those when the days when I was a kid, I really different stories from newspaper. My father was a newspaperman. So I think it was fascinating and I would collect the stories and I would write the words that I liked best in my collection. I had a book with the collection. So for me, it was a natural path to go into journalism and be a writer. And somewhere along the way, before I finished the school, I realized that I really wanted to be a photographer. And what I told my father that I want to be a photojournalist, not just a photographer, photojournalist. And he was like, oh, no, start, please. Can you try something else, like fashion, advertising? But no, I wanted to do photojournalism, and I wanted to do a newspaper. I had this passion for working in a newspaper. And so I went to work in a newspaper in São Paulo, where I worked for many years as a staff photographer, doing many assignments a day, boring assignments, great assignments. I learned a lot there. I had a great space. I had great editors that taught me to see beyond the bureaucratic of business portraits. I had this wonderful editor who would look at me and say, we think David Lynch, think velvet, blue velvet, just do something different. Don't bring me someone sitting behind the table. So that was amazing, and it's an amazing school. So I've been living in Mexico. I moved to Mexico for personal reasons for 10, 11 years ago. But I've been working as a freelance photographer. It's still for newspapers mostly. And my father will be proud, he's not here to see that I do stuff. But so this story is the story that I've worked on for the past 2 years. It started on September 2014 when 43 students disappeared in Ayotzinapa. Students, if you're familiar with the story, students from a rural school in Guerrero, it's a state in Mexico. They disappeared, and to the date, nobody really knows what happened to them. And it was a big outcry in the country. They disappeared, they claimed they were kidnapped by the police and the army. And the local mayor of Iguala, a small city in Guerrero, and were handed to a narco group where they were burned and disappeared. So we started, I started following the story for the New York Times, and when it happened, we went there, and it was a Saturday, the phone rings, and this starts happening, so let's go with the next morning. So after that first time, I went there many, many times. It was a big story, and I did for many, I did for the New York Times, for Pacific News, and for the São Paulo. So I kept going back for a year on assignment, and this is one of the students that were, he survived that night, the attack. And I was at the school it's not at the school where they used to live. And this is one of the rooms where they live. And it's a very small room, no windows. And I was like trying to figure out what I was going to do and trying to talk to them. They did not want to talk. It was very recent, and I was very afraid. And I talked to him, and he said, okay, talk to me, but do not show my face. And he told me that in that room they were 13 before the attack. That day was on 4. They were disappeared, dead, and some left. And yeah. So this is the house of Alexander. He was the first one that was identified and the only one. So when that happened, we rushed back again and to his house, his little place in the mountains, where his family had news that he had been identified. So they were holding this morning. This is so with BuzzFeed News, we decided to follow the one family of one student through months and along months, and try to tell the story of one family and try to really show people who were dead. And this is the house of Adam. This is where he lived with his wife and 2 kids in his parents' house. He was 21 years old. He was on the first year of school, and he left behind a son, an 8-year-old son, Sanjel, and a 3-year-old girl, Alison. She was younger. And this is a candle that his wife leaves on. Ever since he disappeared, she left the candle on 24 hours a day to and this is Addison, the girl, his daughter, and that's her favorite dress. She wanted to put it on and show it to me and started dancing around the house. She doesn't really know exactly what happened, and the family routine changed a lot after he disappeared. His parents are always in marches and going around the country, and they don't have time to work anymore. And the girl, she suddenly has fits and she starts crying, and that's when she was happy and singing, and then she just started crying. Yes, this is his father, Adam's father, and Adam's boy, Arvid. And he's so tired. And then Arvid spends a lot of time in the house because there's a lot of protests in March and the schools are out a lot of the time. And they live really near Yatsunapa, the school, they live in Texas. So they're all the time, they're in the school. Like a lot of parents were not from that exact part of Guerrero, they're from all over the state. And they're very poor. But one of the requisites to study in that school is that you have to be working in the field. So for many of these kids, it's the only way out of being a farmer or living in crops. So this was when he was exhausted. He just come back from, they leave like 4 in the morning, get on buses, go to Mexico City. He went to Switzerland, and he was so tired, and he went to watch TV, and sat on his lap, and they started watching TV. That was inside the other room, and they both fell asleep. And this is back at Alexander's house the night that they identified his body, and so they were having this morning. It's in Mexico, they do this rosary thing where every day for seven days, the family and friends unite at the person's house, family house, and they say all the prayers. So that's what's happening. And this is the grandmother, and then there's another little town in Guerrero where the grandmother of 2 brothers that went missing. And this town, 4 students went missing, and 2 of them were teens. And this is this little town, which is also the same town from the survivor from the first photo. And when we went there, they were having a Fiesta de Pueblo. It's every town in Mexico has a saint. When it's there's the Saints' Day, they hold this festivities. So that's, and then there's they dress with typical clothes. There's food and dances, and so that's when that happened when we were there. So that's why he's wearing this dog mask. And this is so Guerrero had become this state where the cash crop is opium, and it's a lawless country. Just this year only, so it didn't stop, it didn't get better after that, even after all the detention. This year only in Tucumcino, which is the capital, the state capital, more than 56 businessmen were kidnapped. 200 businesses had to shut down because of the explosion. And so, because nothing happened and government does not help, or it just makes things worse. So these groups, the self-defense groups, were created where community members act as police and chief and lawyers. So everything that happens in the city, in the little town, they come to them. So, oh, somebody came to my land, and or he trespassed, or because I have a problem with my neighbor. Everything comes to their hands. So this is one of the self-defense groups in their headquarters. And this is the grandmother of Alexander, who lived next door to him, and is still waiting for him to come back. They all are waiting for him to come back. So while I was working on this story, I was working also on a little multimedia piece So I was collecting and asking people for photos of the boys and families, photo of them together with the family, or video clips, or anything they had. And I kept listening, hearing, oh, I don't have pictures, I had it in my phone, but I lost my phone, I changed my phone, I don't have it, I don't print them. And then I thought, well, this is difficult, interesting world that we live in, because everybody has phones and they all take pictures, but we don't print them anymore, so there's not a memory anymore. So these people disappeared, not once, they disappeared twice. They disappeared from their memories too. In 3-4 years, there's nothing, and there's nothing gonna be a proof of that these people even existed. So I was thinking, and I thought, well, it would be interesting to shoot family portraits and give people the portraits. So when I was doing this, it was the call for the Getty Instagram grant, which was to the grant was for a photographer that was working on portraying underrepresented communities, and I had been shooting in Guerrero, and I had been posting on my Instagram feed, and it was something that grew very organically. I did not know in the beginning what Instagram was, and it was like a mix of personal photos and making off or things that I was working on. But when I was in Guerrero, I was really like posting photos that I knew it would not like on lifetime, like, and what I was seeing, and it was very interesting the response I was getting from public in general. So I applied for the grant, and I was one of the 3 photographers who got the grant last year. And with this grant, I decided to do this project, which is called Family Matters, and it's a bit of I went back and photographed some of the families that disappeared, but this project is more about creating memories and being a witness to how we live these days through the family portrait. And so I went to this little town in Guerrero, which is in the mountains. It's about a 9-hour car ride drive from Mexico City. And I wanted to go to a place where people lived in a difficult situation, but at the same time, I did not want to feel that put them in danger because I was photographing them. And so I had to make sure that they were okay of me going into this village. And I wanted to photograph, since it was a family project, I wanted to photograph them in their Sunday best, and I was going to give them the prints at the spot, so I was going to bring a little printer and give it to them. So I thought, well, if you're going to keep the print, you better be looking your best. So I thought it would be good to be doing it on a Sunday, Saturday, Sunday in front of the church. Open space, nothing to hide. People come and take a picture. You don't have to pay for anything, just come there and pose. So it was very interesting because in Mexico it can be very difficult. People are very distrustful and with good reasons. So I went there, and there's this small town. So they have like this speakers, the system. It's like a radio system where they go in and pay 10 pesos to announce that you have bread ready, or that the bus here. So it's kind of like the radio of the place. So I was there, and then they speak a different language. They don't speak Spanish. They speak Musgo, which is an Indian dialect. And so they announced that I was going to be there at the church, and people started coming. And it was fascinating to see. It was in the beginning, they looked like they really knew what to do, and they were posing it. This was an Instagram project, and I was photographing with my phone and my camera, but mostly with my phone. So this is all taken with my phone. And I was going to print, so I had this printer, a small printer that I like to see what I was doing with my phone. And so I made this, and I thought about portraits, and that's why I thought, why I wanted it to be something that was kind of like out of the space and time that we live in. And I was, oh, this is great, like I started to print them. and I gave them this, one of those prints, black and white, and they were looking at it and, oh, there's something wrong with it. They were like, there's no color. They did not really like it. So, yes, I started photographing with color for them and printing like sprayed color normal for them, and black and white for me. And a lot of them, it was fascinating to see because they would come and they first look and see what I was doing, and then they would go back and brush their hair, change clothes, put on a nice dress, come back, and they were very serious about this. For a lot of them, it was the very, very first time in their lives that they were photographed. This mother and child, first time they had a photo of them together. And this is Untitled. So at the end of the first day on Saturday, he came, and first he came with his wife and he posed, and I took a picture of them. And then he came back with his grandson, a small boy, and he said, can you take a picture of us three now? I said, sure, no problem. So I took a picture of them three. And then while he was sitting waiting for the prints to be ready, he looked at it and he was very emotional about it. He said, can I come and bring my horse? Because he's my best friend and I want my grandson to know and grow up knowing what a good friend I had. And he said, well, and I said, of course, so it was late, so he came back next morning. He brought the horse and I photographed him. So what I did is I give them the small print, it's a small print like this. And then I go back to Mexico City and I print them bigger. So they can have it, like bigger prints if they want to put it on the wall and give it to another family member. And so I went back and it was, then he came back from his big print and I said, so how's it going? And he said, well, he passed like 2 weeks after he took his photo. Oh, really? So sad. He said, yeah, but he has his daughter. And I forget, and I forget her. That was kind of fun. So yeah, so I had the whole family horse. So this is like a place that's one of the things that I wanted with this project. It's about preserving memory, and this is one of the things that I was surprised to see that they still dress like that. Like the women traditionally keep using their traditional dresses more than the men. The men are the first ones to change into more Western clothes. But there in this place, they still dress like that, and I felt like it was in 1920. And this is something that is going to change very soon. It's already changing. So for me, it's more than just about the disappearing. It's about keeping things from disappearing. This is another grandmother. So you see the new generations, they're like dressed differently. And this is a town where they're famous for their hand weaving, the textiles. They do very complicated textiles. And this is the local self-defense. And it was very interesting for me to see because I was struggling on assignment to persuade these guys, let me shoot them and photograph them. And then here I come, on my second trip, and they're like, after me, can you come and take a picture? Because that is a little bit like genocide, like when you're not a threat and when you're trying to present them and you're giving back something, and you're not asking for anything. It was very liberating for me to be working like this. So like just, I went to bed after a whole day shooting and I was just happy because, they have the pictures. I've done my job, But when I was shooting this, I was posting live at the New Yorker feed on Instagram because they wrote me and said, we would like you to take over our account. What are you working on? I said, well, I have this coming out. I didn't know what I was signing up for it because when I got there was no cell phone connection or Wi-Fi. I was like, how am I going to upload this photo? So I had to they had like a Wi-Fi connection, but the self-defense were like very, very, very not very strong, they let me use it, but I had to be standing outside the gate, you know, like on my phone, like trying to close like 3 a day. It was like, oh, come on, good, do this. This is a personal project. I don't have to do this. So, yeah, so this is Don Margarito. It was interesting for a change, you know, to have people being happy about having their pictures taken. And again, it was interesting to see how seriously they took this and how proud they were to be taken pictures, to have their picture, the portraits taken. And yeah, that's it.
I'd like to invite our
I wish we had a couple of bottles of wine and we could just sit here for a couple of hours talking because it's so great to see your work. And the question as an editor, I'm not a photographer, that I get asked probably most often is, what is an editor looking for? And these 4 women really represent the answer to that. They're doing work that stands out, and they've been successful in putting their name, getting their names and getting their work out there. They're not necessarily coming to me. It's my job to know who they are and what work is out there that's really exciting and new. And so I'm watching that whole kind of sphere in photojournalism. So what's interesting to me is just looking at all 4 of you. It seems to me that there was a click, that there was a moment where you really moved to a different place in your work. Whether with Adriana, it's the platform, it's Instagram. With Glenna, it's still lives that you're doing that people were paying attention to. And with Melon and with Kirsten, I think it's access. Although also with Kirsten, I think once you went to the aerials, I think those aerials are just kind of amazing and take the work into a different place. So I'm just wondering, you know, the other thing that photographers are often talking about is how do you find your passion? How would you answer that? Whoever wants to take that first.
I think for me, because I had already lived and worked in the town, I was very attached to this place. So once it became a news story, I felt a huge sense of personal urgency to get part of the narrative because I feel know that there's a lot of rhetoric about the murder and the simplified ideas. And so I felt very strong. I knew that to document what's going on.
But where did you stylistically? I think stylistically there's also kind of a shift. Is there something that were you watching like the landscape? Were you looking at pictures from other people and saying I just have to do something different?
No, but I was spending a lot of time explaining to editors what the landscape looked like, and I realized that I wasn't doing a good job capturing that. So I did fight for this access because I thought it would be able to have me explain the same ideas that I was writing. And I purposely knew that I wanted to shoot it a bit wider and have it really give us a sense of scale to show how physically difficult and varied the terrain is.
So the work that Alice just mentioned, the work that I didn't show tonight, I did still lifes of some of the objects that belonged to the schoolgirls who were mass abducted by Boko Haram in April of 2014. And for me, I think the main reason I was able to do that was just because I've been in Nigeria for so long that I knew how to operate there. I mean, it's an incredibly difficult place to operate. Like, everybody's hustling, nothing works, like there's very little structure. But once you know how to ask for what you want and how to understand whether or not it's possible, it was really amazing to me to be able to do a lot. And I felt like everything I was able to do was very high stakes. And suddenly, you know, I remember when the school bus first came out, I was on my way back to Nigeria to do a totally different story. And I dropped it and changed gears. And I think for me, it was just having the knowledge of a place and knowing a place so intimately that I was able to sort of complete this logistical task of having these items that belong to these girls transported from this incredibly remote town to a photo studio in Abuja where I could do this work was what made me able to do something that nobody else was doing. And suddenly, you know, I was in the epicenter of, you know, a viral media story, and I shot some of it for Time with Michelle Malloy, and I shot some of it for the Wall Street Journal, and the photos went on and were published in a lot of different places. But you know, the thing about a lot of these places, you know, if I ask someone, hey, I want to do this, people are very hesitant to say no. They always say, yes, next tomorrow. And eventually you figure out that means no, and you learn how to ask somebody else. And for me, I think that's what's made a huge difference in my work, is just knowing how to navigate a place and to read people and to know how to get what I'm looking for and how to get access to photograph those things and share them with the media.
I think that in my case, as I said before, I really love working for newspapers, and I really love the thickness and being fast and the deadline. But one thing about being a newspaper photographer is that you do too much in very little time, and you don't really go deep into the stories. So I always felt this need to work on the side projects where I could, you know, dedicate more time and a little bit more of who I am into the stories. And I don't really know what they're going to become. Then they just sort of like take the life of its on. And I have a friend that says, you don't choose the stories. It's like the stories sort of choose you, you know. And it just happens. And in my case specifically, the Instagram that Alice said, I think that the iPhone or mobile or whatever, it really changed my way of photography and gave me a lot of freedom, because I was not, you know, you always carry this big camera around, and I was not carrying my camera around to the supermarket, to the grocery store, you know, running a bus. And with the phone, I started doing that, and I started just seeing it. That's the thing. I started seeing it, and it gave me a lot of freedom. And it was something that was for me. It was my feed. I didn't have to show it to any editor, or it was just something that was mine. And it was my little, as I used to like to say, my secret card. I think that really opened, you know, this other part of me to experiment and to go very personal.
I think when you're starting out, it's really important to kind of cultivate what you're interested in. Because, I don't know, whatever you end up kind of making your name or your brand as a photographer, like, people are going to ask you to work on this kind of project. So it's really important to, like, be really into it. And I didn't really, I can't say that I would recommend my path to anybody, because I never even went to college. I just knew I wanted to do photography. I didn't even work in a newspaper. I just kind of like navigated my way into it somehow. And it was the quickest route, but I would just say, like, for example, with the Israel story, like, it's a place that people want content from. So in a way, it made it a little bit more sellable because people were more interested in it, because people knew a lot about it. And there's always stories like that are a bit like hotter in the news, but if you're starting out, I would recommend find some kind of different thing there that you're able to own and put your perspective on.
Actually, I wanted to, just because when you're talking about Abuja or Guerrero, and it sounds like, oh, it sounds like a beautiful, I'm going to Abuja next week because it sounds so nice. And this is actually for Nina too, because Nina's a badass. If any of you don't know, that she's been a photographer for teaching, and she worked in Bosnia and did amazing work. Photographer Stanley Green was quite known, said to me last week in France, the biggest photojournalist investment in the world. He said Nina's archive is incredible, and they're just digging through that now. As a kind of fearful person, how, Abuja is very difficult. I did a story in National Geographic a couple of years ago with a man who has lots of experience in war. What kind of, I hope, security precautions are you taking? What do you set up with family members? Do you work alone, or are you working with a fixer? Do you work with security? I mean, the same with Adriana Guerrero. It's Mexican journalists. It's probably the most dangerous place in the world for journalists to work. It's really, it's very dangerous. Mexican border, the same thing. How do you do that? Is it something that you naturally have, or is it something that you put yourself in that position, you realize that you can deal with this fear?
I'm not gonna answer that, I'm just gonna add for our guests. Basically, how do you keep your confidence in your nerve without being reckless in a way? And do you do much preparation? Do you feel that security can sometimes hinder you? Like Malin, you said that when you arrived at the detention center, the men were amazingly welcoming to you. Yet what you had heard was that it was a scary place, an inviting place maybe. And so you're also finding things that go against what you've been told. I think maybe for me, that's part of the amazing talent that I see here, is that you're kind of going against conventional thinking in certain places.
I mean, I think it's interesting working sometimes in like high risk zones, because there's usually like a system set up in high risk zones, like safe places, or like, of course, no place, like I've been in war zones and like different conflict areas, but there is a certain set up way to move about it, because usually there's some kind of aid organizations or other journalists that work there, so you kind of like know your routes. Of course, nothing is 100%. Like the story in South Sudan, like last month, really took me aback, where there was a safe compound that was raided by military, where they raped a bunch of aid workers, and like these are one of the areas that only one of us would be staying, and that really like took me aback, because like in your head you kind of, when you're there, you kind of feel like you're safe because you kind of know where it's going on. Like I'm sometimes more worried in places where she works at, where things are coming at you in different directions and you can't really tell where it's coming from.
Well, in Mexico, it's a little complicated because you can't trust anyone. You can't trust the police. You can't trust the army. You can't really trust anyone. So you don't really know what's going to happen, and it's kind of random, and it looks quiet, and it's like nothing's happening, and then there's a shootout, and then next thing you know, there's a car with 15 bullet holes, and the friend trying to be you, and there's all these things going on. But I think we know that's happening there, and I just try to be assert where I'm going and not being reckless, but you have to take some risks, otherwise you wouldn't do anything if you were just stay in the same place or stay in my apartment, right? And so what I do, like if I have to rent a car, I rent a car, I take a picture of the plate, of the license, I send to my editor, I send to my husband, and this is the car, this is the model, and I said constantly WhatsApp, I'm living in this place now, I'm going there. When I arrive, let's say this where I am here, this is the hotel I'm staying, this is the room number, and everything. Like when I come back to the the day I get to my room, I'm here, everything's fine. And so at least, if something happens, they know where to start to look for you. But sometimes you have to take risks, like this family, that was a family living in Tixla. Tixla is a very small town, and they had one hotel. And the alternative was to be into Consingo, which is not much better, but it's far, and there's a big piece of the road, this stretch of the road that's very dark, and it's very windy, and there's like this drop, and that's where they actually, like, if they want to get rid of someone, it's very easy there because they can make it look as an accident. So I was like, don't drive that road at night, don't drive that road at night. But that means that you never have the good life, because like not in the morning, not in the evening, if it's sunny, it's manic, so okay, it's only staying just like a little hotel. But then you can sleep at night, there's all this cockroaches, and then you find out that it belongs like walking all over you, and you're exhausted, and then you can't sleep at night because, just all this roaches around. But then the worst of that is to find out that they belong to this huge narco god, and they know everything you do, and then you're like, okay, and then someone says, you know what, I don't think it's a good idea for you to stay there. So, there we go, back to Tupancino and driving at night. So, sometimes you take risks and you say, okay, okay, it's raining, just the light I was waiting for, like, should I? And we just pray, and then But I mean, and then taking this other kinds of precautions. I think BuzzFeed News is doing the great work. It's really on top of security. We have a security detail like on top of us. We have a Telegram chat. We have to check in every person we're interviewing, every place we're going, every time we leave, every time we get home. Everything. So I mean, they're far, but at least they're aware of what you're doing.
So my mom is in the audience. Yes, I buy Reporters Without Borders insurance when I'm going to specific places, and most of the time when I'm on assignment, I'm reimbursed for that by publication. But if I'm generally on a trip, I will buy it for the whole trip. The first thing I would say is that most of the time, what I'm doing doesn't really feel scary. Like when I'm in Kano, it's like, oh no, somebody's gonna feed me too many cookies and juice. It doesn't feel like what my idea of scary is, and I think in some ways that can really let you let your guard down. And the best thing to do is to think about the risk, and then once you've decided to accept a risk, you're going to do everything you can to mitigate risk. So what's the safest way to get somewhere? What's the safest way to be there? What's the maximum amount of time you should be there for? What's the minimum amount of time you can be there and get what you need? I would also say that I'm not wandering around northern Nigeria by myself. I'm working with people who I trust. So, for example, in Kano, I spent a lot of time driving around with a taxi driver named Sani and a translator named Faisal, and Faisal took the train with me. And, when I think back on that trip, like what are the things I could have done to make it safer? I actually wish I had gone with 2 people because Faisal eventually fell asleep, and I fell asleep too, and it would be better if there was a 3rd person. So the next time I do something like that, that's what I would do differently. The best thing I did on that trip was have that permission letter, because there were a couple of incredibly dicey moments, and because the people on the train supported me being there, they solved the problems. Like at one stop, I was taking photos from the train of the platform, and there was a guy on the platform who got really angry and tried to pull me off the train and tried to pull my translator off the train, and everybody was screaming, yelling, and like, I just didn't let go, and then I got on my phone and I called the main train guy, and he told everybody to calm down, and we got back on the train, and it was all okay. If I hadn't had that permission letter, it wouldn't have been okay. There was another time I was driving, I was on assignment for the Wall Street Journal, and I was taking the road from Kano to Maiduguri, and it was a story about, this dangerous road in northern Nigeria. So once you decide to do that, how do you decide to do that safely? So we had Sonny drive behind us. We took a truck. We were in the front lorry of a truck. I was with the Wall Street Journal correspondent and with our fixer. And we had Sonny, our taxi driver, drive behind us. And we were detained by the Nigerian military at one point, which frankly is a more realistic and obvious and clear threat to me than Boko Haram. The chances of Boko Haram, anything happening with them, are just so incredibly slim. I mean, it's truly terrible if it does happen. So I'm going to do everything in my power to avoid that. But, you know, the military is a force that I interface with every single day when I'm in northern Nigeria, and they are a much bigger threat. So it's also really important to know what's the real threat and what's the boogeyman.
Yeah, no, I mean, we were sort of laughing when Audrey and I talked about waiting for the good light, but that's, I mean, that's what we're doing as a doctor, we're waiting for moments of good light. So, and the last thing you want to do is go into a place that's really dangerous for a couple of hours and not get any. So you want to make sure that it's worth your time. I think in my own personal work that I showed here in the border, which is where I do a lot of my work, because I've been there before it got so bad, I got sort of a baseline understanding of what it should feel like. And there are some areas now that I know that I just don't go there. There are stories I want to do that I don't do. And then for the stories I do decide to do, I communicate with people. I do work on my own. I don't want to pay for a fixer, and I also don't think it would be helpful because I speak English and I do know the area quite well. So I would communicate with law enforcement. I would use retired law enforcement or any sort of constable's office or lower level law enforcement because they have no bureaucracy and they just don't think it's hilarious. And so I'll try to enlist anyone that will help me that is like armed and knows the area.
So, since we're running a bit late, I thought we should open it up to questions now, and we could talk all night, but I'm sure you guys have some questions. So if you do, just walk up to the central mic and feel free.
Here, we're going my way through all of that. Thank you all so much for coming. That was absolutely spectacular. So, two very simple questions. One is, do you have a favorite lens? And what is it behind? The other one is, beyond your camera, what's your most beautiful piece of kit?
My phone.
For everything.
Yeah. What's one?
I use an iPhone 6S, so to speak. 6 Plus.
I would say the 2047 is my favorite lens, and what's helpful to me when I work is actually my hair. It's a good icebreaker.
I generally have a 24 on or a 35 on, and I don't switch it up all that much. I like to be steady and consistent. And then other than my gear, I would say I have this little pouch that's got like Tums and rehydration tablets and a granola bar and like an inflatable pillow and some like chapstick and moisturizer. And I just have that little pouch with me all the time. And you know, it almost becomes more about like knowing that I have a chapstick if I need it than actually getting the chapstick. Big flops.
Or, yeah, or some shady hotel bathrooms. Maybe even my bed.
Still nice are just like good shoes because you just don't know where you're gonna end up. And I usually shoot on a 35 unless I'm shooting aerials and then
Thank you. Thanks for your time. I wanted to ask you about how you got into and what that moment you decided to go for, if you are doing was like.
I mean, my choice is pretty slim. I actually wanted to stay working for newspapers when I left in 2008, but there were no jobs. So my option was either to stay in a small town newspaper on the Mexican border forever, or come to New York and roll the dice. So I thought about grad school. I thought about Mexico City or New York, and New York was also really fun.
I don't know, I never thought I would be working full-time as a photographer anywhere because I never had it as a goal to be like a full-time photographer at a newspaper or anything like that. So I think I started out at a time where that reality was kind of like already gone. And so I just knew from the beginning that I would be freelancing.
Well, for me, it was after my son was born. For a year, I left newspaper because I thought it would hold more time. This newspaper, it was 10 hours a day. You get in, but you never know what time you get off. And with being freelance, I thought it would hold more time.
I've always been freelance. I started freelance, and if anybody would like to offer me a job, I will happily
First of all, thank you so much for sharing the story and sharing the work. I'm from South Africa, with South African parents, and so my question is mainly to Glenna and possibly Kirsten, kind of for in that direction. So I appreciate, and I know I really look at myself from that perspective, I appreciate that idea of changing the narrative, or diversifying the narrative of a place, but particularly so it can kind of like good conflict and negativity. And I wanted to know, how do you feel that comes across? Would you think it would be better off if people from those communities, from those kind of environments, got to take their photos, and why those photos aren't making it onto platforms like Time Magazine or onto New York Times? And I mean, I suppose that if you're from the area, you understand what it means to take a photo of a place where you kind of live and have those experiences and is your own unique experience. So I wanted to know if diversifying narrative with clients would benefit from people out that area, thinking about themselves and why it's not coming out there.
It's funny, like, I thought about this a lot, and I think there needs to be more diversity just because there needs to be more diversity, period. Like, I don't think, I think a lot of people are trying to push for, like, you're supposed to tell your own story, but I kind of feel like that in a way is living in the land of low expectations. Like, I want a Nigerian photographer to travel to Ukraine. Like, that's what I want people to end up. And I think we're in this stage where it's like people are waking up to the fact that there's actually people in Africa that take pictures and can actually do those jobs. And I think it's good that people are moving in that direction, but I also feel like there needs to be 3 steps more, and according to me. And yeah, it's funny because I mean, I'm partially from the continent myself, and I have this debate a lot with my friends about the narrative about Africa, and like, and for me, as a photographer, as a documentarian, I gravitate to, of course, some of the more like stories that I feel are important, but at the same time, I know that's not the whole narrative, and I try to go between both because for me, both things exist and they're both true. And I think we're going to see this shift of African photographers coming up, but then I want 5 steps more than that. Like,
I just want to completely and totally second everything Mullen is saying. And I do think that there are more opportunities than ever. I know World Press Photo, which is sort of one of the gatekeepers of photography, is also making a huge effort. They've created a database of African photographers. They're doing master classes for African photographers, and there's a lot of people who are working to be more inclusive of a lot of voices. That process takes time. I think we all need to push it forward as much as we possibly can. And but at the same time, I'm also fearful of identity politics being the driving force behind who gets to take pictures, because there's Nigerians living in London who haven't been to a third of as many villages in Nigeria as I have. And for me, one of the things that I value when I look at other photographers' work is deep and intimate knowledge of a place. And that is my first concern, right? Like, why is this person there taking this picture? What is their motivation? What are they trying to share and what are they trying to tell? And I think that if we start from that within a prism of trying to be as inclusive and give as many opportunities as possible, I think we can move forward in a meaningful way to have a more diverse set of storytellers.
I just came from this. There's the biggest photojournalism festival in the world is in Peppermint, France. And the first time I went to that festival in 1993, it was pretty small. Now there are thousands of people. And what was exciting about it
this time was exactly what you're talking to, the beginning, the seeds of that, which I could see. One of the most interesting photographers I met was an Eritrean who was a refugee. He had done the crossing, lived in Libya for years as a refugee. And now he's documenting refugees. He lives in France and he's become a photographer. And it's always, as a photo editor, it's really exciting to see something like that, because that's exactly what we're looking for, is what you're talking about, people telling their own stories. But his pictures, now that he's on an NGO boat, look exactly like anybody else's, but they're good. But that inside, that understanding from his perspective is really what I want to see, because otherwise it looks like anybody else could take these pictures. And something that when I see students, I'm always really interested in, because they look like they're just copying an older form of photojournalism. They're not, we're looking to, all of the photo editors are looking for the new voices, but they're not really creating new voices work. I mean, really, Nina's pushing herself more because of the background and the experience, that she knows what's been done. And I find sometimes with young photographers, they're not as exciting visually as I would hope that they would be. So I think what you're asking is really important, but it's also important to help those people find a new visual way of telling their stories.
Just quickly, there's one of the positive things about Instagram is some platforms for photographers that I certainly would have never known, and a real driving force with one feed is called Everyday Africa, and there's some amazing work on there. So there's Everyday Iran, Everyday Middle East, Everyday this, and people are learning enormous amounts from these feeds. So that to me is been really, really exciting. Thanks for your question.
So I'd like to address the elephant in the room. I think it's just so powerful, this panel of you all, I know you all, and you all your stories, and for the most part, it's all what you showed tonight. But just to address that issue, and I know it's an old issue, but the thing is, do you feel pushed out by men? Do you feel that you have it's changed, that you have an upper hand, that you can tell your story and continue, or do you feel like men are in a position to get into a more difficult situation? Maybe Alex chooses a man for a story because she feels that to say that that is something proper, then and I don't know the answer. Also some of the more powerful photo editors now and that has changed drastically too. It's very true that men are more men photo editors now. But so
really? I didn't know. I feel like almost all of my editors are women.
Usually it's the women and then the people on the top.
well, it used to be secretaries.
The secretaries. But Henry used to come in.
But I just like your feedback on have you had run-ins with men? Do you have good with them? Do you feel like it's balanced out that we don't have to have that issue?
Well, before you answer, I just want to say, when we were putting this panel together, we thought at first, okay, we want women photojournalists just because men normally get the spotlight, but we didn't see it as, oh, this is going to be a panel about how women photograph or women photographing women's issues. From my perspective, I've never seen a time that's more exciting for women photographers. When I was starting, I would often be the only woman in the room, and it was quite alienating at times. But for me, I find myself gravitating very deeply towards the women voices. I don't know if it's because you're coming at things from certain sideways or from a very personal, intimate desire that maybe, not saying that men don't have that, but there's a certain macho quality to covering hard news. And what I get from your work is something much more personal and thoughtful and quietly poetic, but also, very strong. So just for the women photographers in the room and the new students, I think this is an amazing time. to be women.
I mean, we could talk about that. And just, I mean, I think it's just like, I'm asked to comment on being a woman in photojournalism a lot, and it can be, I have mixed feelings. It can be annoying, right? Because you're like, is that all you're gonna ask me? I also knew that if these women were organizing it, this would not be like that. But to answer your question, when I'm out in the field, it's not as much of an issue. Where it's an issue is in crowded situations, especially in New York City, where there's actually like a physical proximity to men because they do have a tendency to literally push you out of the way. But you know, you just fight back and earn your space and pretty quickly get out of your way. So I think that, I mean, we're lucky because Nina and Maggie and this generation of women like, do these amazing things to where I don't have to think twice about it. And I feel like in general have been treated fairly. There is a perception that there's things that we can't do. Some editors wouldn't send me to certain places, but I do think that's an interesting word.
I think it makes a really big difference for your first couple of assignments. I have seen editors take risks on men who are not experienced in a way that sometimes makes my blood boil. But I also feel like once I passed a certain threshold, it became an advantage. So, you know, I feel like there are a lot of editors out there who want to hire me, and that feels wonderful. And, you know, there's all sorts of, everybody has different disadvantages and advantages when they start. And it's not that I have on horse blinders and I don't see it, it's that you just move forward anyway. And, you know, in the field, I actually think it's a huge advantage. You know, obviously I have no framework for comparison, but, you know, like, knock on wood, everywhere I've ever been, I have felt generally like so welcomed and so people want me to be there, and you know, I'm not threatening, and you know, when I'm dealing with the Nigerian military, they don't take me that seriously, and that works to my advantage. So like, they want to think that I'm like some student on vacation, like great, you go ahead and think that, I'm still gonna get done what I need to do.
Another elephant in the room, have you ever been sexually harassed by a male editor or person in power?
Yes.
Yes.
Absolutely. But I'm not sure, that's not unique to this. I mean,
I'm just shocked by it, but somebody named Nina told me about it. And I've asked young photographers because, and they've confirmed, yes, this happens. Portfolio reviews, blah, blah, blah. And it's just, you know, in 2016, it's just kind of surprising that's happening. What I also find interesting about that is that perhaps older women, accepted it and weren't even aware that it was sexual harassment, where a younger generation is saying, I'm not putting up with it.
This is more of a strategic question, really, for those of us who are starting out. I'm not a photojournalist, but interested in international coverage. So I was just wondering how you went about building kind of a contact list of editors you can contact when you go to a certain country. You know, you might be interested in publishing your work. Kind of how you advise those who are starting out to go.
I would just say, like, I don't know, look at the people who are putting out work that you like. And those are the people to contact. You know, like, I contacted Phil Victor and like the edits and stories that he puts out, and I helped us with connections to the work that he does. And yeah, when I was starting out, I didn't really know the landscape very well, so for me it was like a lot of fumbling, but yeah, just look at what you read and contact those people.
Yeah, I really like part of my strategy is come to New York and research and editors knocking on doors at Alice and trying to really calling and say, hey, I'm back in New York, I'm proud of things going to New York, and then try to build that relationship with that person.
I think, I mean, everyone has their own way of doing it, but for me, it was very motivated to support myself. So as soon as I moved to New York, I did thing I know how to do, which is shoot newspaper assignments. And I went straight to the New York Times. I also went to all the wires who turned me down. But thankfully, the New York Times was interested in having me shoot, and I started shooting almost every day. So I shot for many, many years, like whatever assignments they didn't, no one else wanted to do, super last minute things. And then I built really great relationships with these editors, and those editors go on to all of my publications. So, I always tell people to try to find one regular client, especially if you're starting out. Get good. Don't always go straight to the top. Go someplace where it's a manageable level of challenge, I guess. Like you want to be challenged, but you don't. People that go straight to the New York Times and they make a big mistake and they never hire again. Like I tell people to go to a small newspaper, but nobody doesn't do that. So then I don't know. Start at some client that feels like you're comfortable being there, but you're being challenged. And then build it slowly. Like you're not, if you send, you're like, I'm going to Eritrea, and you start contacting Alice and I've never met you. I can't really,
I actually would be interested in that. It is about access. I see people, I would call and say, in this day and age, of course, we see everybody, we work to see, but having that, I'm going to Eritrea or I'm going to someplace that would be surprising or interesting, but is the door to the absolutely. Absolutely. And my job is, that's the thing, I am supposed to know all of you. I mean, I'm searching all the time for new photographers at work, but as Kirsten said, you don't want to ruin that ability right off the bat. And I just meeting all these photographers in Europe, and seeing like a student who says, I'm getting into Magnum, and he's going to reply to Magnum, well, that's a bad idea. That's not, I don't recommend it.
I would also say that I think the other thing that's very helpful is being friendly with other photographers. The first month I was in Liberia and just sort of starting to be really serious about photography, I met Tim Hetherington, who at the time was super done being in Liberia. He was like, peace out. And a lot of my very first big jobs were because he passed them on to me. I photographed the president, Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, for the New York Times Magazine 6 months after I got there because he recommended me for that job. And then the other thing I want to say is just to keep with what Alice and Kirsten are saying, like, don't put the cart in front of the horse. Like, you gotta go make good work, and nobody's gonna hire you to make work until you've made work, which is the worst catch-22 ever. But being able to trust yourself and move forward and create work, and doing it without somebody's stamp of legitimacy or permission slip is the kind of gumption that I think a lot of editors want to see. So find a way to make it work. When I first lived in Uganda, I interned at a local newspaper and blogged for the Huffington Post and just did whatever I could find. And eventually my body of work accumulated. And I was just in Indonesia working on some new stuff, and I was talking with this Indonesian photographer, and he was like, so-and-so big named editor didn't write back to me. And I'm like, yeah, that sounds about right.
It's almost impossible. We get so many emails. I don't write back to people like my family members, because you just miss them sometimes, and you have to really develop a thick skin. It's like if we're looking, you can send a second email as a reminder. I sent this work, but it's also that the editor isn't there to give you advice. So I think some young photographers think that our role is to I have to see you because you have to help me. You are there to or I'm looking at you to say, do you have something that could be good for my publication?
We'll take one for the last question. Sorry.
Two questions, first question is kind of related, where how would you suggest curating the journey? Now it's not enough to be one offline photographer. So if you have any suggestions, you can send out how to curate, and if you happen to throw in a name or two. You guys have all been inspiration to us. I definitely look at your Instagram and your photography. And so who are your inspirations? Who are you following right now in this field?
Yeah, it's like, I like watching what my friends are doing because I know them personally, so like I know how they approach things, and it's so fascinating to see how they'll approach. So like I can't wait to see Glenna's work in the news, she never worked there, and I'll see a tiny bit of it. That's what inspired me because I know her approach, I know how she thinks, but hundreds and hundreds of people that I follow. Cars Creative is one that I'm really into. I Google Creative.
I think the branding question is another like cart and another horse. Like it's start making work and figure out like what gets you going, what's the kind of work that you want to make, and the branding comes after that. And if you're like, what's my brand? If you're asking the wrong question. The question needs to be like, what do I want to do? Like, what do I want to see in this world? What's out there that makes me excited, and how do I go find it? And for me, I definitely think it's about a peer community. I think especially as there's less sort of vertical mentorship, like I see a lot more horizontal mentorship, and like all of these ladies here are definitely doing amazing things that keep me going too.
I mean, just to be a little bit more specific, like I really think it's important to find a lifestyle that's sustainable. Like for me, it was daily assignments to the New York Times. I can manage that. I can run out and shoot. I don't pay very well, but I was shooting every day. And then whenever I had time, I could like start researching the stories in the border. So you just have to figure out a way you can make a living while you're still shooting. So I was shooting, I was problem solving, I was meeting and working with great editors and reporters, and I learned so much there. So if you can find a situation, somebody that believes in you, that hires you on a regular basis so you can at least cover your rent, then you can like kind of breathe and get your head above water and start thinking about the bigger picture. But like you have to like get sharp and get confident before I think you're gonna really go out on this thing.
In my case, for instance, like I moved to a different country with a small baby, and it was very hard for me to travel, being away for long periods of time. So it was a problem for me getting assignments that I could not, like, I cannot be away for more than 2 weeks. It's really complicated. My husband also is a journalist, he works for the Associated Press, he works, he travels, so we don't have that network. And so I really had to, work on assignments that were, sustainable, and projects that were sustainable for me logistically. I mean, I could not think of having a personal project on the other side of the planet because it's just not possible. So I was working near me and finding stories, in Pepito, in Guerrero, working in a way that's everywhere. So it's about exactly what Lisa said. It's like what works for you. I think it's amazing to do all this work a way that it does not work for me.
So I want to thank you all for coming. It's been a wonderful evening. Let's give a round of applause. Place to ask some questions. Thanks.